When the alien queen saw me, she asked, "Are you single human?" As a xenobiologist working for Earth's Interstellar Exploration Bureau, he had traveled to strange worlds, cataloged bizarre plants, and occasionally communicated with alien species. But today felt different. Today, he was heading to the most exclusive planet in the Andromeda Coalition, Violia, and he had no idea why he felt his stomach twisting in nervous anticipation. Violia was known across several galaxies as the home of the alien queen, a being so powerful and intelligent that even seasoned diplomats approached her court with caution. Reports described her as elegant, multi-limbed, and impossibly graceful. Rumor had it she had little patience for fools. Alex had prepared thoroughly, memorizing etiquette guides, practicing his greetings, and rehearsing his responses to a dozen potential questions. Still, nothing could have prepared him for the moment he first laid eyes on the queen herself. The shuttle doors opened into a chamber bathed in soft, iridescent light. Crystal-like walls shimmered as if alive, reflecting colors Alex didn't even have names for. The floor beneath him seemed to float on currents of energy, moving imperceptibly with each step. Alex swallowed hard, reminded again why humans were both fascinated and cautious around alien worlds. A figure moved at the far end of the chamber, drawing his gaze immediately. She was taller than any human, with limbs that seemed to flow and bend like liquid, yet every movement radiated purpose and grace. Her skin shimmered like the surface of a pearl, and her eyes, large and multifaceted, glimmered with curiosity. Alex froze. The Queen of Violia was more magnificent than he had ever imagined. The room fell silent as the court attendants and advisors bowed low. Alex instinctively followed, unsure if he was doing it correctly. The queen tilted her head, studying him, and then unexpectedly she spoke. "Are you single, human?" The words hung in the air like a delicate chime. Alex blinked, certain he had misheard. He looked around, hoping someone would explain that this was a formal test, a cultural metaphor, or some alien ritual he had missed in his training. But no, the queen's gaze was fixed on him, unblinking, and she repeated her question, softer this time with a hint of amusement. Yes, Alex stammered, unsure if it was the correct response. His mind raced. He had dealt with alien pathogens, navigated diplomatic minefields, and even negotiated trade agreements with three-headed beings, but he had never been asked about his relationship status by a galactic monarch. I'm available, yes, he added, trying to sound confident. The queen's smile was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it made Alex's stomach flip. "Interesting," she said, her voice a melody of harmonies that resonated in his chest. "We don't see many humans in my court, yet you intrigue me. You will stay." Alex froze again, this time out of uncertainty. "Stay? For what purpose?" His voice came out more cautious than he intended. "Learn," she replied simply, gesturing gracefully. "Observe, understand. Humans are unusual. I would like to see what makes you so fascinating." Alex's mind buzzed. The reports about the queen being eccentric were clearly true. He had expected tests, lectures, or maybe an inspection of his credentials. He had not expected this. He followed her instructions cautiously, walking through corridors that seemed to shimmer and bend as if the walls themselves were breathing. The Palace of Violia was a marvel. Rooms floated in midair, connected by bridges of translucent energy. Gardens hovered with plants suspended in the air, leaves slowly spinning as if dancing to music Alex couldn't hear. Flowers glowed softly, changing color with the angle of the light. Streams of water curved in perfect arcs without gravity, droplets suspended midair like delicate jewels. Alex wandered in awe, taking notes on everything, hoping that someday his reports would do justice to this world. The queen did not speak much as they walked, yet Alex felt the weight of her attention. Every gesture, every glance made him hyper-aware of his human form. She seemed fascinated by the way he moved, the way he touched objects, the subtle habits that marked him as human. In a court of beings who had perfected every motion and expression, humans were unpredictable, and unpredictability intrigued her. Finally, they reached a vast chamber filled with what Alex could only describe as alien art. Sculptures floated in the air, shifting shapes continuously, colors blending and separating in impossible patterns. A symphony of light and sound played around them, forming harmonies that seemed alive. Alex stepped carefully, unsure how to navigate this strange display without making a misstep. The queen watched him silently for a moment. Then she asked, Do you understand what you see? Alex hesitated. Not fully. It's very different from anything on Earth. The forms, the colors, they seem to respond to each other and to us. Precisely, she said, nodding. Humans have a peculiar ability to notice details others overlook. You find connections we do not. That is why I wish to observe you closely. You will show me what it means to be human. Alex felt a mix of pride and confusion. He had read about human ingenuity, their reputation for creativity and adaptability, but experiencing the Queen's fascination firsthand was surreal. He realized that she saw humans as something unique in the galaxy, not merely another species to catalog. Over the next few hours, Alex was shown more wonders of Violia. He saw plants that sang when touched, streams that flowed in reverse, and rooms where gravity shifted depending on the angle of your gaze. At every turn, the Queen watched him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Whenever he reacted with genuine wonder, she seemed to glow with delight. At one point, a minor crisis occurred. A floating crystal sculpture began to wobble dangerously, threatening to collapse. Humans might panic or step back, but Alex instinctively reached out, using his knowledge of balance and force to steady it. The Queen's eyes widened, and a ripple of laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound so melodious it made Alex smile nervously. You humans always finding ways to solve problems without thinking in the same patterns as the rest of us, she said. It is refreshing. By the time the day ended, Alex was exhausted but exhilarated. The Queen had spoken little about formal duties or politics, yet he felt he had passed some invisible test. He realized that his value was not only in his knowledge or skills, but in his very human way of seeing the world, with curiosity, humor, and adaptability. As he prepared to leave the chamber, the Queen spoke again, this time more softly. Rest now, human. Tomorrow I will show you more. You will learn, and perhaps I will learn from you as well. Alex bowed deeply, trying to mask his excitement and nerves. He left the chamber with a strange mixture of awe and disbelief. He had always believed that humans were one of many species in the galaxy, each with their strengths. But standing in the presence of the alien Queen, he understood something different. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and clever in ways no alien court had fully appreciated. That night, as he rested in a guest chamber that floated gently above a luminescent garden, Alex could not stop thinking about the Queen's question. Are you single, human? It seemed almost irrelevant in a practical sense, yet somehow it had become the key to everything. Her curiosity about him, the way she focused her attention, and the subtle way she seemed to challenge him, it all suggested that being human carried a weight the galaxy did not fully recognize. Alex lay on his floating bed, staring at the ceiling that rippled like liquid glass. He smiled to himself. Tomorrow, he would continue to navigate the wonders of Violia, under the watchful eye of a queen who found humans endlessly fascinating. And somehow, he felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be, not just as a scientist, but as a human being who could show the galaxy the true strength of his species. The chamber outside shimmered faintly, reflecting the glow of distant stars. And somewhere beyond those walls, the alien Queen observed, her thoughts focused entirely on this unusual, clever, and unpredictable creature called a human. Alex closed his eyes, ready for whatever the next day would bring. He had no idea how his life was about to change, but he knew one thing for certain. Humans were extraordinary, and the Queen of Violia was about to find that out in ways no one else ever had. And as he drifted into sleep, he could almost hear her laughter echoing in the halls, a sound that promised curiosity, challenge, and perhaps a friendship unlike any he had ever known. The morning light on Violia was unlike anything Alex had seen on Earth. Instead of a sun, a giant swirling orb of soft golden energy hovered in the sky, casting gentle ripples across the floating gardens outside his chamber. Flowers drifted lazily through the air, their petals glowing with hues that shifted with every movement. Alex had slept fitfully, half in wonder, half in anticipation of what the day would bring. Breakfast arrived in a floating tray that hovered silently in front of him. The food itself seemed alive, fruits that shimmered, changing flavors when bitten, and a drink that adjusted its sweetness based on the drinker's taste. Alex took cautious bites, marveling at how something so beautiful could also be edible. He reminded himself to take careful notes. In his profession, even small observations could be important. A soft chime announced his escort. He followed the court attendant down corridors that twisted and curved in ways that defied logic. Alex had learned to trust his instincts. Trying to map the palace in a linear way was useless. The walls themselves seemed to guide him, opening passages as if aware of his presence. He arrived in the queen's chamber to find her waiting, seated on a throne that seemed to float slightly above the ground. The throne itself was made of translucent crystal, radiating a calm light. Her many limbs were folded with elegance, and she regarded him with an expression that was equal parts amusement and curiosity. "Good morning, human," she said. Her voice, as always, resonated with multiple tones at once, forming a sound that was almost musical. "Yesterday you observed and reacted well. Today I have something special for you." Alex felt a thrill of anticipation. "Special?" he echoed. "Yes," she said. "I wish to see how humans interact with unfamiliar challenges. Follow me." He followed her through another corridor, one that seemed to curve endlessly until they entered a large, circular room. In the center floated a strange device, a puzzle of lights, shifting shapes and rotating rings. It emitted a soft hum, and as Alex approached, he realized it responded to movement and sound. "This is the Virelian Challenge," the queen explained. "It has never been solved by any of my court advisors. I am curious to see how a human will approach it." Alex felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He had solved difficult problems before, but nothing like this. The puzzle seemed alive, constantly adjusting and reacting. The shapes rotated, lights blinked, and symbols rearranged themselves unpredictably. "Do I just touch it?" he asked. "Interact as you see fit," the queen said. "There is no wrong way, only the approach matters." Alex took a deep breath. He observed the puzzle carefully. Instead of trying to force a solution immediately, he allowed himself to play, experimenting with different movements, seeing how the device reacted. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Certain lights responded to rhythm, others to pressure, and some seemed to respond to subtle gestures. The queen watched silently, her many limbs folded gracefully. Alex could feel her attention, not as pressure, but as curiosity, the pure kind that made humans excel when others underestimated them. He realized he could combine intuition with logic, experimenting in ways that were unconventional. Hours passed as he tested, observed, and adapted. At one point, he accidentally triggered a chain reaction. Shapes began spinning rapidly, lights changing color in complex sequences. Alex froze, expecting some kind of reprimand. Instead, the queen laughed softly, a sound that filled the chamber with warmth. "You humans," she said, smiling. "You approach problems differently. You do not follow the rules of others. You improvise. That is fascinating." Alex smiled nervously, encouraged by her praise. I'm just trying to see how it works." "Exactly," the queen replied. "You try, you adapt, you experiment. Most beings in my court would have stopped at the first obstacle, but you continue." Gradually, Alex began to see the solution. Not by brute force or memorization, but by combining observation with creativity. He realized the puzzle responded best to small, deliberate actions, each one influencing another in a subtle chain. With patience and care, he began moving the rings, pressing the symbols, and guiding the lights into a harmonious pattern. As the final piece clicked into place, the device glowed brightly, projecting a shimmering holographic pattern that filled the room. Alex stepped back, breathless. The queen's eyes gleamed. "Remarkable," she said. "You have succeeded where none of my advisors have. Humans possess a unique form of intelligence, not only logical, but intuitive, flexible, and creative." Alex felt a warm rush of pride. He had always known humans could be clever, but to hear it from the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy was astonishing. More importantly, he realized the queen wasn't just impressed by the puzzle. She was fascinated by him, by the way he thought, observed, and reacted. "You understand things in ways we do not," she continued. "You see connections where we see separate parts. You improvise. You adapt, you inspire." Alex laughed softly. "I never thought of it that way. I just try to make sense of things." "That is why you are extraordinary," the queen said. "Humans have a capacity for insight that is rare across the stars. That is why I wish to study you closely. Not to test, not to challenge, but to understand, to learn." Alex felt a mixture of pride and humility. The queen's interest was not in power or conquest, but in genuine curiosity. He realized that this was a moment of connection, an exchange of understanding between species. After a short pause, the queen extended one of her limbs, pointing to a set of hovering tablets. Symbols shifted on their surfaces, forming images and sequences Alex had never seen before. "This is your next task," she said. "Observe these, interpret them. Humans have a talent for finding meaning where others do not. Show me what you see." Alex approached the tablets, studying the intricate patterns. Each symbol seemed to tell a story, but the connections were subtle. He began by drawing parallels to human experiences, imagining how the patterns might correspond to emotions, movements, or natural processes. Slowly, he began assembling a coherent interpretation, explaining it aloud as he worked. The queen listened intently, her eyes never leaving him. She asked questions not to test, but to deepen her understanding. Alex responded honestly, admitting when he was unsure and speculating when he was curious. The exchange was dynamic, a conversation without words, a dialogue of thought and perception. By the end of the session, Alex had mapped a complex story from the symbols, demonstrating a human ability to synthesize information creatively. The queen nodded, her expression one of admiration and delight. "You see patterns where others see chaos," she said. "You find order in uncertainty. That is why humans are so intriguing." Alex felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any he had experienced. He realized that the queen valued not just intelligence, but curiosity, adaptability, and imagination, traits humans often took for granted. Here, they were extraordinary. The rest of the day passed with more exploration. The queen guided Alex through the palace, showing him technologies and cultural practices that defied comprehension. Alex asked questions constantly, sometimes receiving answers that were almost philosophical in nature. He learned about Violian art, music, and the subtle ways they communicated emotions through movement and color. Throughout it all, the queen's attention remained on him. Whenever he expressed wonder, solved a minor puzzle, or reacted with humor, she seemed to glow with interest. Alex began to understand that this was not mere curiosity, it was respect. The queen saw humans not as simple creatures, but as beings capable of insight, creativity, and connection. At one point, they reached a room filled with floating gardens, plants that drifted freely in the air. The queen gestured for him to touch them. As he did, the plants responded, glowing brighter or moving in patterns that echoed his gestures. Alex laughed, delighted by the interaction. "You humans," the queen said softly, "have a way of engaging with the world that is alive. You do not just observe, you participate. That is why you fascinate me." Alex felt a warmth he had never known. He realized that his uniqueness, his humanity, was being recognized on a scale he could hardly comprehend. The galaxy was vast, but here, in the presence of the queen, humans were celebrated for qualities that mattered most: curiosity, creativity, empathy, and humor. As the day ended, Alex was escorted back to his chamber. Exhausted but exhilarated, he reflected on what he had experienced. The queen had challenged him, yes, but in ways that celebrated his humanity rather than testing it destructively. He understood that this was only the beginning of his journey, a journey that would reveal not only the wonders of Violia, but the remarkable potential of humans in a universe that often underestimated them. As he lay in his floating bed, watching the alien stars shimmer outside his window, Alex felt a deep sense of purpose. Humans were clever, adaptable, and full of curiosity. They could surprise even the most powerful beings in the galaxy. And somehow, he felt that the queen's fascination was just the first step in showing the universe what humans could do, and who they truly were. The palace was quiet now, but Alex could almost sense the queen observing from afar, thinking about the day's events and anticipating what tomorrow would bring. A challenge, perhaps, but he felt ready. For the first time, he realized that being human was not just a fact of life. It was a strength, a gift, and a source of wonder that could inspire even a queen. And with that thought, Alex drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, ready for whatever the next day might hold in a world where humans were more extraordinary than anyone had imagined. The next morning, Alex awoke to a soft hum vibrating through his chamber. The floating gardens outside shimmered in pastel hues, and the gentle golden light from the twin suns of Violia painted the room in warm tones. Today, he knew, would be another day of challenges, but this time he felt more confident. He had learned to navigate the palace, to interpret the queen's subtle gestures, and to trust his own instincts. Humans had an edge, and he was beginning to understand it. A gentle chime announced that he was to meet the queen in the central hall. He dressed simply, as he always did, and followed the glowing corridors. Along the way, he marveled at the floating streams of water and the gardens that seemed to sway with a rhythm only they could feel. Each step reminded him that Violia was alive in a way Earth had never been. When he arrived, the queen was already waiting. She hovered slightly above the ground, her multiple limbs folded elegantly, her eyes shimmering with curiosity. "Good morning, human," she said. "Today I will introduce you to something new, something you must understand with your mind, your instincts, and your human heart." Alex's curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. The queen extended one of her limbs, pointing to a large sphere that floated in the center of the hall. It was translucent, filled with shifting lights and shapes that moved in ways that seemed both random and deliberate. "This is a Violian mind matrix," she explained. "It reflects not only knowledge but understanding. Most of my advisors cannot comprehend it fully. I am curious to see how a human will approach it." Alex stepped closer, studying the sphere. It seemed to pulse in response to his movements. Shapes inside the matrix shifted when he tilted his head, brightened when he focused, and arranged themselves into patterns he could barely grasp. It was overwhelming, yet thrilling. He took a deep breath and began to experiment. Instead of trying to impose logic on the matrix, he let his intuition guide him. He moved his hands slowly, gesturing in ways that felt natural. The sphere responded subtly, adjusting its patterns to follow his flow. He realized quickly that brute force or strict analysis would not work here. What worked best was observation, creativity, and patience, exactly the human traits the queen had admired before. The queen watched silently, her expression unreadable, but her eyes followed every movement. Occasionally, she asked questions, not testing him, but provoking deeper thought. "What do you see?" she asked. Alex considered for a moment. "I see connections," he said finally. "Everything here is linked. Patterns that shift, but they follow rules that aren't obvious at first. If I move one element, it affects another. And some connections are emotional, almost like feelings or intentions." The queen's eyes glimmered with approval. "Yes. Most beings fail to notice the emotional threads. They see only logic or chaos. Humans, you see both." Alex smiled. "I guess humans are good at reading between the lines." "Precisely," she said. "You understand the subtle, you interpret the hidden. That is why I find humans endlessly fascinating." He continued experimenting with the mind matrix, discovering that certain gestures or patterns triggered responses that were surprising yet harmonious. At one point, a spiral of lights formed around him, pulsating in rhythm with his movements. Alex laughed in delight, enjoying the playful interaction. The queen's laughter echoed behind him, soft and musical, a sound that filled the hall with warmth. "You are learning quickly," she said. "And yet there is more. The matrix is not merely a puzzle. It is a reflection of understanding itself. You must find the balance between observation, action, and intuition. You must sense the patterns without controlling them entirely." Alex nodded, understanding that this was not just a test of intelligence, but of perception. Humans had a unique advantage: the ability to combine reason with empathy, logic with instinct, and observation with imagination. He realized that this advantage allowed him to interact with alien systems in ways no Violian could. Hours passed as he explored the sphere, adjusting movements, watching reactions, and learning to anticipate subtle changes. Each success encouraged him, each failure taught him something new. The queen occasionally made small suggestions, hinting rather than instructing, allowing Alex to discover solutions in his own human way. At one point, he paused, noticing a pattern he had not seen before. It was delicate, almost invisible, connecting the smallest shapes inside the matrix. He traced it with his finger and the sphere reacted, folding the pattern into a cohesive whole. The lights shifted, forming a perfect, radiant mandala. Alex stepped back, amazed. The queen's expression was unreadable for a moment, then she smiled. "Remarkable," she said. "You humans perceive connections we rarely notice. You find unity in diversity, harmony in complexity. That is why you are special." Alex felt a surge of pride. He had solved something that the most brilliant beings of Violia could not through power, but through observation, creativity, and intuition. It was a moment that made him realize the true strength of humanity, the ability to adapt, to think differently, and to approach problems with a combination of heart and mind. After a short pause, the queen gestured for him to follow her. They left the central hall and entered a smaller chamber filled with strange musical instruments. Each instrument floated in the air, producing light and sound that changed with touch. Music is another form of understanding, the queen explained. It is emotion expressed in rhythm and vibration. Humans have a unique ability to connect with music intuitively. Let me see how you interact with these instruments. Alex hesitated at first, unsure how to produce meaningful sounds. He touched one instrument, a floating orb that glowed softly, and it responded with a gentle, harmonic note. He experimented, combining notes in patterns he remembered from Earth music, adding pauses and rhythms that felt natural. Slowly, a melody emerged, simple but expressive, capturing feelings he could not fully describe. The queen observed silently, then, without warning, joined in. Her limbs moved with elegance, striking notes and producing lights that harmonized perfectly with Alex's melody. They created music together, a collaboration between human intuition and alien perception. The notes wove a tapestry of emotion, energy, and connection that neither could achieve alone. When the music ended, the queen spoke softly. Humans do not just solve problems. You create, adapt, and express. You leave your mark in ways that cannot be quantified. That is why you inspire. Alex smiled, feeling a bond forming that went beyond words. The queen's fascination was no longer mere curiosity. It was respect, admiration, and a desire to learn from him. He realized that humans could leave an impact not only through intellect, but through creativity, empathy, and ingenuity, traits that no amount of technology or training could replace. The day continued with exploration. The queen showed him floating gardens where plants communicated through subtle light changes, and chambers filled with water that flowed in impossible arcs. Alex experimented, touching and interacting, observing patterns and finding connections the Violians themselves overlooked. Each interaction deepened his understanding of their world, and each response seemed to delight the queen further. At one point, she asked him a question that caught him off guard. "What do you feel when you explore these wonders, human?" Alex paused. "I feel alive," he said honestly. "Curious, excited, sometimes overwhelmed, but in a good way. Everything here is beautiful and strange, and I want to understand it all." The queen's gaze softened. "That is human nature. You feel deeply, question constantly, and seek understanding not for power but for connection. That is rare in the galaxy. That is why humans are exceptional." By the time evening approached, Alex was exhausted but exhilarated. He had learned more in one day than he had in years on Earth, and yet he felt there was still so much to explore. The queen, too, seemed energized, her fascination with him growing. Before parting for the night, she spoke softly. "Tomorrow, I will introduce you to something even more complex. It will test your perception, your intuition, and your creativity. But I have no doubt you will rise to the challenge, human. Your kind always does." Alex bowed deeply. "I will do my best, Your Majesty," he said, feeling both pride and excitement. As he returned to his chamber, he reflected on the day's experiences. Humans had a special way of seeing the world, not just observing, but interacting, connecting, and creating meaning. In the presence of the alien queen, he realized those qualities were not just appreciated, they were celebrated. Lying on his floating bed, he thought about the mind matrix, the musical instruments, and the gardens. Each had been a challenge, yes, but also an opportunity to show what humans could do. He understood now that this was the essence of HFY. Humans could shine not through strength or power, but through curiosity, creativity, empathy, and ingenuity. Outside his window, the alien stars shimmered, reflecting in the glowing gardens below. Somewhere in the palace, the queen observed him, thinking about the day's events and anticipating the next. Alex felt a thrill of excitement. Tomorrow promised new challenges, new wonders, and new opportunities to prove that humans were extraordinary. And with that thought, he drifted into sleep, dreaming not of danger or conquest, but of discovery, creativity, and the infinite possibilities that came from being human in a galaxy that was just beginning to notice their brilliance. Alex woke to a soft golden glow that filled his chamber. The floating gardens outside seemed more vibrant than ever, petals shimmering in patterns that almost looked like waves. For the first time since arriving on Violia, he felt not only curiosity, but a sense of belonging. He was still a visitor, yes, But he also felt that the Queen's fascination had given him a small place in this strange, beautiful world. A quiet chime signaled the start of the day. Alex dressed and followed the floating corridor to the central hall. The palace felt alive, as if it were watching him as much as he was watching it. He had learned to trust the subtle signs of movement in the walls and the rhythm of the floating streams, guiding him effortlessly. When he arrived, the Queen hovered in her usual spot, her many limbs folded with elegance. Today, her eyes sparkled with an intensity Alex had not seen before. "Good morning, human," she said. "Yesterday, you understood patterns and expressed yourself creatively. Today, I will show you something more, something that will reveal not only what you know, but who you are." Alex's curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. The Queen extended one of her limbs toward a massive chamber ahead. The doors, if they could be called that, opened seamlessly into a space that stretched impossibly wide. In the center floated a sphere, larger than the one from yesterday, but this one seemed alive in a way that was almost emotional. Colors shifted as if reflecting moods, patterns twisted and turned like thoughts made visible. Alex felt his heart quicken. "This," the Queen said, her voice calm and resonant, "is the Virelian emotion matrix. It is not a puzzle like the mind matrix. It cannot be solved. It must be experienced and understood. Few beings can interpret it correctly. Most see only chaos. I am curious to see how a human will respond." Alex approached cautiously, studying the shifting colors and movements. At first, it seemed impossible to understand. The lights changed unpredictably, reacting to his presence in subtle ways. He remembered the lessons of the mind matrix: observation, patience, intuition. But this felt different. This was not a mechanical puzzle. This was alive, almost sentient, responding not to logic but to emotion. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. He let himself feel rather than think. Curiosity, wonder, and calm filled him. He reached out with his hands, moving gently through the air above the sphere. It responded, swirling with delicate patterns that seemed to echo his feelings. The Queen watched silently, her gaze focused yet patient. Hours passed as Alex explored the emotion matrix. He realized that his reactions, even small ones like a laugh or a deep breath, shaped the patterns in the sphere. When he expressed amusement, lights danced in vibrant spirals. When he concentrated, colors slowed and aligned in intricate chains. When he showed hesitation or doubt, the sphere mirrored it with rippling waves. The Queen spoke rarely, allowing him the freedom to experiment. When she did, her words were subtle, probing deeper. "What do you feel when the colors shift?" she asked softly. Alex considered. "It feels alive, like it's listening to me, like it understands me in ways words cannot. It's beautiful and strange and comforting." The Queen's eyes glimmered. "Few beings can sense the matrix this way. Most are either overwhelmed or indifferent. Humans, however, have a capacity to feel deeply and intuitively. You notice patterns in emotion as well as logic. You connect where others only observe." Alex smiled softly, realizing something profound. This was more than a test. This was an exchange, a dialogue between species, between worlds, between consciousness itself. And humans had a unique ability to bridge understanding with empathy, creativity, and intuition. As he continued to explore, the sphere began to respond to more subtle cues. He realized that humor affected it differently than curiosity. Patience changed the patterns more deeply than force. Even the slightest flicker of wonder or surprise shifted its design. Alex began to experiment deliberately, combining emotion with subtle movements, coaxing the matrix into shapes that seemed almost meaningful. The Queen's reaction was quiet but noticeable. Her eyes glimmered, her limbs moved slightly, a soft ripple passing through her form. She was fascinated, not by the colors or lights, but by Alex himself. His ability to perceive, interpret, and influence the matrix in a human way fascinated her. At one point, Alex laughed at a particularly surprising response from the matrix, a sudden flare of colors that formed a pattern resembling a constellation he had seen on Earth. The Queen's soft laughter echoed behind him. "You humans, you respond in ways that are unpredictable and delightful. That is why you inspire. That is why you are exceptional." Alex felt a warmth spreading through him. He realized that his human nature, his curiosity, humor, and emotional intuition was not just accepted here, but celebrated. For the first time, he felt truly seen, not as a visitor or an outsider, but as a being with unique strengths that even the most advanced species of the galaxy respected. The Queen gestured for him to follow her deeper into the chamber. Floating platforms rose and shifted beneath their feet as they moved. Alex noticed that the colors of the matrix changed subtly with every step they took, as if the space itself responded to their presence. "You understand patterns in emotion," the Queen said. "You can perceive subtlety, notice connections that others miss. But now I wish to see how you act when confronted with choice. Will you respond with thought, instinct, or heart?" She led him to a series of interactive light panels suspended in midair. Each panel displayed a scenario, a challenge of ethics, creativity, or intuition, but with no right or wrong answer. They responded to touch, gesture, and expression, shaping themselves based on the user's approach. Alex studied them carefully. He chose one at random. The panel presented a situation in which a community of alien beings faced a subtle conflict. Alex considered the options, not for correctness, but for understanding. He experimented, interacting with the panel in ways that reflected empathy, humor, and creativity. The panel responded, shifting its patterns to show consequences and outcomes that were subtle, interconnected, and surprisingly human-centric. The Queen observed silently, impressed by his approach. She seemed to lean slightly forward, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and admiration. "You consider not only outcomes, but intentions," she said softly. "You think about the whole, not just the parts. That is rare." Hours passed as Alex worked through the panels, experimenting with combinations of intuition, logic, and emotional perception. Each panel responded uniquely, revealing new layers of understanding. He began to see connections between them, patterns that no alien advisor had noticed before. Finally, the Queen spoke. "You see not only with your mind, but with your heart. You interact with systems, ideas, and emotions in ways that are uniquely human. That is why I am fascinated. That is why your presence here is important. Humans are remarkable." Alex felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had faced challenges that no one else could, not through brute intelligence or training, but through human ingenuity, empathy, and curiosity. In the presence of the alien Queen, he realized, humans were celebrated for what made them truly special. The day ended with a quiet moment in the floating gardens. Alex touched a plant, and it responded by emitting soft lights in a gentle spiral. The Queen watched him, a faint smile on her lips. "Tomorrow, human," she said, "you will face your greatest challenge yet. But I have no doubt you will rise to it, for your kind always surprises." Alex nodded, feeling both anticipation and excitement. He understood that this journey was more than exploration, it was a revelation. Humans had strengths that were often underestimated: creativity, adaptability, intuition, and empathy. In the presence of beings far more advanced than themselves, humans still possessed qualities that could inspire, challenge, and transform. As he floated back to his chamber, he reflected on the day. The mind matrix had tested intellect. The emotion matrix had tested perception, and today's challenges had tested the integration of thought, feeling, and creativity. Humans were not just observers in the galaxy. They were connectors, innovators, and interpreters. Lying in his bed, gazing at the softly glowing gardens outside, Alex realized something profound. His journey on Violia was more than a diplomatic mission or scientific expedition. It was an opportunity to show the galaxy what humans could do, to prove that curiosity, creativity, and empathy were not weaknesses but strengths. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, the Queen watched him. Her fascination was no longer simple curiosity. It was respect, admiration, and anticipation for the unique contributions a human could bring to her world, and perhaps to the galaxy itself. As Alex drifted into sleep, he thought of the challenges ahead. He did not fear them. He looked forward to them, ready to engage with his mind, his heart, and his human spirit. For in a universe that often underestimated humans, he knew they had the power to inspire, create, and connect in ways no one else could. And in that quiet, glowing moment, he understood the truth. Humans were extraordinary,